3 more in-person meetings like this. They will be in March, June, and September. So that's 4 times a year, including tonight. And this is an experiment for us. So we're trying to figure out how many people still want to meet in person. And I think it's the topic and the panelists tonight, as well as a lot of promotion that many of us have been doing to get this great attendance out. So thank you for that. And just know that you have 3 more opportunities to be in person. But we also have people online. And this is really great that it's another option for you if you can't be here in person, that you can Zoom. We are recording this. So that also means that if you have to leave early and miss the door prize, you can go back on and you can actually, see the rest of the meeting. But that also means that you can always go back and see any of our topics. We have a great YouTube channel. So please know that you can go back and see other topics. And we did a topic like this several years ago, so you can go see what those panelists have to say. So just know that CAPCA programs are free and open to the public. Some of the benefits that we offer that are only for members, Tony mentioned, like the job board, and some of our tours that you see here will start out being member only. If we don't get enough responses, we will open it up to you to bring a significant other, a friend, a spouse, or we'll open it up to the public as well. So just wanted you to see that up there. So February 24th, next month, will be Zoom only. And we'll be talking about taking action to protect the Chesapeake Bay. This program has been intentionally designed, scheduled to be in the middle of the Maryland legislative session so that we have time to educate you, and then you can reach out to your legislators here in Maryland. And even if you're not in Maryland, but you're working on the Bay, you can still write to the legislators and tell them what you care about with the Bay. So we wanted you to be informed, and so that's what next month's program will be about. I wanted to point out that Chesapeake Bay Foundation is sending their attorney to speak. Again, it's on Zoom, so he'll be speaking on Zoom. But also Johnny Shockley, who is a real-life waterman, who is one of 3 generations, who's been working the water. And watermen are often not really happy about the legislation that sometimes happens. So I think it's really important to hear his view on things. So I hope you will attend by Zoom next month. And then March, Women's Awareness Month. I missed it last year. I planned a man to speak that night. We have a woman speaking this month, this March, and it is Elizabeth Chrisman. She's spoken to us in the past. She is amazing, and she is a woman pilot, and that is a very rare breed. So we wanted you to hear exactly from her, and she's coming and will be in this room again in March. So that will be an in-person meeting. Then the tentative tours on your tables is a white page. I really hope that you fill this out. Even if you're a guest tonight or not a member, we still want to hear from you and tell us what you think about these next 2 tours that we're planning, either March 19th or the 26th for a tour of the John W. Brown and NS, the nuclear ship Savannah, in Baltimore, next to each other. There'll be a brown bag lunch in between. There'll be a full day, and it is an intense day because they know captains are going to be very, very interested in these ships. So know that that's coming up. The approximate cost is about $15, and we might be limited to 35. Now, if we open it up and we've got like 45 people all of a sudden wanting to be up there, then I might talk to both boats about maybe switching, and we do like a tour of each boat and then switch and go to the next one, if that makes sense. So please, if you're thinking about doing that, register early. And if we look like we're maxing out at 35, maybe we can split it up into 2 tours. So, but I'd have to get the ships to agree. Or we can just repeat it again in the fall. We're trying to hit all of this before the busy spring commissioning season happens. So that's also why January and March are in-person meetings, because we figure we have a better chance of getting you in person before spring starts. And then the last one to point out is under my section is the tour of Thomas Point Lighthouse. Again, very important. This is $90 if we do this. It is a minimum of 12 and a maximum of 16. So please let me know on here if you're willing to pay more than your annual dues to CAPCA to go on a 2-hour tour. I hope you say yes. It is the 150th anniversary of that lighthouse, I believe. It is a nonprofit. This is what they charge the public. So if you were to sign up, you would be paying for this to go see. So I'm hoping we have a minimum of 12 people. I would definitely want to go, so maybe another 11, and we could do this. And at this, I'll introduce Mike Dillon to talk to you about the upcoming class.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm the new incoming continuing ed director. Alan has been very helpful in guiding me and taking this over. We have an upcoming CPR class. Unfortunately, the renewal class had to be canceled due to conflicting schedules with the proctor. However, we are still going to have the CPR class. It is on March 15th. We have to have a minimum of 6. We already have 4. So if a couple more people sign up, we're good. Apparently we should hit that minimum. The cutoff for registration is March 8th, 1 week before. And that's all we have for now. If anybody has anything that they would like to have a class on, please email education@capca.com and I will look into, I'm sorry, .net, not .com. And I'd be happy to look into any program or any classes that might be offered that we can put on. So if there's any recommendations or suggestions, I would be happy to take that. At the next meeting, I'll try to come up with some of my own ideas. But until then, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Tony. I'll get us going. One little piece of administration before we begin. The rules that govern business associations like CAPCA don't permit us to talk among ourselves in a CAPCA setting about prices that we might charge. Other than that, we're here to learn from each other and to learn from this fantastic panel. I've been working to put this panel together. I and the committee have been working for some weeks now. Very pleased that you're here. Tony kind of mentioned you by name. On the blue sheet on each of your tables, there's a bio for each of these people. But I'm just going to start with April Balech and just ask each of you in turn just to please say a few words about yourself and about your business and your expertise. Thank you.
Used to having one of these in for singing, but not talking. April, I work for Arthur J. Gallagher. My office is Charter Lakes Insurance. We were purchased by Gallagher, so we're all part of the Gallagher family now. I've been there for 27 years. I've been doing charter boats. Yep. Feedback. Insuring charter boats for about 35 years now. Been in Annapolis for a long time. Was a singer for the Naval Academy Band. Been around boats forever. And happy to be here.
All right. Thank you, April.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name's Chase Eshelman. Yes, I am old enough to practice law. I know most of you guys are probably asking that, so I'll answer that one right out of the gate here. But I'm an attorney at Lochner Law Firm. We are a boutique maritime law firm located out of Annapolis, Maryland. We handle a wide array of both transactional and litigation issues, all touching the water, most of which deals with vessel purchase, registration, tax advice, captain's contracts, foreign flagging, as well as your typical sort of marine injuries, vessel collisions, et cetera. And thank you, Bob, for having me.
All right, thank you. All right, and Davis.
I'm Davis Jones. In addition to being your vice president, I am a co-owner of Shardana Sailing Charters. We operate a Catalina 425, 42-foot sailboat out of Rock Hall. We do everything from 3-hour sunsets to 7-day trips up and down the bay. I'll talk a lot more about that in a minute.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I've got a mic. All right. So we've got a great body of expertise here in this panel. So when all of us are on the water, right, we're all carrying one of these, right? We're carrying our Merchant Mariner credential. The Coast Guard issued this credential to us because we've demonstrated that we have the skills and the abilities that we need to safely operate a vessel carrying passengers for hire. And that credential doesn't come easy. As all of you know that have earned this credential, it takes quite a number of years, a lot of days underway, and it's some pretty rigorous testing to get this credential. And this is the old book format that a lot of you are familiar with. You can get a lot of endorsements on this credential, but the one endorsement the Coast Guard can't give you is a business degree. credential. We've got a wide range of business interests among the CAPCA membership. I represent that segment that is coming into this in retirement. I worked my career, I retired. Now I've got my license, and I'll probably try to start working that license this year to do some training on the water. There are some of you that are doing this full time. It's your regular source of income. You're putting dinner on the table, but no matter where you are, there are in this range of captain work we can do. There are a lot of things you want to know. Some of you have been running your businesses for a while, and you may know some of this, but it might be a good refresher. But for those of you that are taking your first steps or thinking about taking your first steps, there's a lot to learn from this group. We'll collect questions as we go along. I think Dave, either you or Hillary are monitoring questions, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can when we wrap up and be sure those get answered. So I'm going to start with Davis Jones, if I may. You've been in business for a number of years with Shardana Charters. You started this business up. You seem to be very successful at it. So Davis, could you talk a little bit about going back to the early days when you had this idea? What was it like for you? What was your experience in getting a business organized? And what would you like to share about what you would have liked to have known then?
Well, first off, let me start by giving a shout out to my business partner and co-owner, Captain Andrew Sellerman. He's probably online somewhere. Couldn't be here himself.
Yep. Hi.
We started out with in 2017. Both of us had a lot of sailing experience. I was Sea Scout leader, so I've got a lot of boat repair experience. But neither of us had any real small business experience. We were both feds, and that doesn't actually translate into anything useful as far as running a business. So I thought I'd share some really good advice I got from another charter owner that runs a boat south of here. And he said, you can't just be two guys with a boat. And that's really sunk in over the years that you really have to think like a business. It's tremendous. Andrew actually came with a lot more experience having associations with other charter companies. He's an ASA instructor and did a lot of teaching as well as deliveries and things. I didn't have that. But he was able to find resources, some of which are here in CAPCA. There's a lot of information on our website. We've got these speakers that have really taught me a bunch over the years. But thought I'd share a few of our kind of kickoff struggles that we didn't really think about. The first thing, and I think you'll talk about it more, is organizational structure. How do you set it up as a business while protecting yourself, your own resources, and set it up? In our case, the boat is owned by an LLC, and the actual charter business is a separate S corp. But in addition to that, you got to get a Maryland state business license. You've got to file those articles of incorporation. You have to, we have a registered agent. I don't know what they do except for cash my check every year. So there's a lot of those fundamentals that I recommend you find a good lawyer that can set it up. Even if it's not a maritime lawyer, just somebody that understands those business nuances. I certainly did not. Financial management, in addition to be captain and co-owner, I am apparently the CFO of this huge corporation. And as a result, I have grown to loathe Quicken with every fiber of my being. However, our accountant thanks me for that service. I wish we had an accountant here we could all throw darts at, but it is essential when it comes to tax time, when it comes to, where did all of our money go? When it comes to convincing your partner that we're really doing pretty well. And that was another exercise where we really had no idea what our limits were. So I went through our years of operation and said, if we ran at absolute full capacity, what would we be able to earn? What's a normal capacity? Well, and now let's compare that to what the actuals are. So those are some interesting financial exercises. Insurance. April, I'm going to defer to you, but it is critically important, not just for your business, but for yourselves. Even if you're not running a business, you're doing deliveries, I think it's valuable to have some personal, professional liability for you as well. And we've got stories we can share about. insurance struggles, especially given a certain dive boat in California that almost put us out of business. Marketing. You can't just hang up a shingle or create a website. We have another captain that has a vast history of, he's a marketing expert and actually teaches marketing with a lot of experience in the maritime industries. And he really helped us define a consistent message about our platforms so that we can reach people and target certain audiences and really expand our reach electronically. Another area I know nothing about, but Andrew has come up to speed on designing websites, and he handles all of our email campaigns, while I've had to figure out how 2 different reservation systems work and work on kind of the back end. And then finally, client relations. We are a small boat, as I think most of us in the room are. I'm the captain, but in addition to that, I am the purser, I am the steward, I am the grill master, I am the trainer, in some cases, the mentor. I have been a marriage counselor, I have been a therapist. It all comes down to you. We are picky about who we bring on as kind of supply captains based on that, because you can run a nice, good, safe boat, you can get from point A to point B, but we want our clients to come back. So we treat them as friends, and we do get a lot of return visitors, and sailing with your friends is great. Making friends out of your clients is even better because they pay for it. So, and it makes it a lot more fun. So that's where the business and the fun really get to intermingle after those long, cold nights trying to fix engines and stuff. So I'll pause there.
Okay, Davis, great. That's a great recap. How many years did it take you to get from beginning to where you are now?
Well, we started the business when we bought the
Yeah.
boat in 2017.
2017, right?
That's
Yeah.
7 years. And that's another thing. We have not had a stable year. We cannot compare year to year and say what's our average, because startup year, nobody knows who we are. Second year got kind of normal, so we thought. Then COVID hit. We thought we were going to go out of business, but instead it was a huge benefit to us because nobody could go inside anywhere, but they can go out on a boat. And then post-COVID, things can decline. And then, so it's been one of these roller coasters. So I still don't know what typical is.
Okay. All right. All right. Very good. All right. Well, so that's interesting. I have to go back to the Coast Guard and get the marriage counselor endorsement to put in this little booklet here. I've thought about a lot so far, but I haven't covered that one. We are missing one professional panel member. He just had something that came up that was just beyond his control, and he couldn't be here to talk about some of the finance and the tax and issues. But just having talked to the 3 of our panelists to build up for this and chatting around the table without getting anybody too far out of their comfort zone, we're going to try to cover some of those issues. I am just early in retirement and just starting down this path. Come back and talk to me in 8 years and see how I did. But one of my first big questions was what type of an entity, and you touched on that. You've got 2. Chase, would you be willing to, and anybody else dive in as appropriate, but would you talk a little bit about forming an entity and what type we might want to form?
Sure. Yeah. So when it comes to entity selection, really the key thing is that you have an entity and that you don't do this just on your own. If you're doing this on your own, then there's going to be no, absolutely no limited liability protection of any kind. You're going to be personally liable, and it's just not ideal. When it comes to actually, picking what formal entity to have, there's really 2 key choices. You have an LLC or you have a corporation. Now, I prefer greatly LLCs because LLCs tend to be a bit more flexible with the way they operate. They're controlled by operating agreements, and you can kind of run them the way you want. Corporations are a little bit more rigid, a little bit more formal. You have things like stock certificates and other things like that to worry about. You have annual meeting requirements where if you're just a sort of a one-guy corporation, you get to meet with yourself once a year and record it in a book, which is a little silly to do. So when it comes to taxes, LLCs usually are kind of pass-through entities, so you're not going to be taxed twice on your profits. Corporations, particularly C Corps, you do get taxed twice. So the company is getting taxed on the profits it makes. The company turns around and pays you, and you pay taxes on that as well. S Corps can get around that, but then there are certain requirements to be an S Corp. So if you got to pick, usually LLCs are the way to go. And certainly, any entity is going to be better than no entity.
All right. And just to clarify, so the LLC, the big word in there is liability, limited liability. So theoretically, it's containing liability in that entity. But now I had some conversations. I just happened to have those conversations with you when I was putting this all together. And one of the interesting things I learned is that that LLC can be breached if you're not careful. Is that what I understand? And you've got to do some things to really contain your risk and your operations in the LLC.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So any entity can be sort of disregarded if you don't observe corporate formalities. So, if you treat the LLC like it's just another version of yourself and you don't, have any sort of operating agreement in place, you don't treat it like a separate company, then a savvy plaintiff's lawyer come after you personally and say, to the court, look, this LLC really isn't anyone different than the owner, and we should just be able to go get the owner stuff itself. Another thing to note too is the LLC is never going to protect you from the things that you do. So if you're at the helm of the boat and you do something negligent, you are always going to be personally responsible. The LLC will never help you with that, nor will the corporation. It's always going to be you getting sued, potentially you and the company. But one thing that, even if you do expect to always be the one at the helm or doing the thing that gets you in trouble, LLCs or corporations are also still excellent just for contracts, because you won't be personally liable on the contract. It'll be the company instead. And so those are also other escape mechanisms. And one of the things that Davis mentioned earlier is having multiple formal entities depending on the assets you have. He has an LLC that just owns the boat. That's excellent. What you want to do is you want to kind of divvy up the bigger assets into their own corporations or LLCs. That way, if something goes wrong, they're treated separately. They won't be able to get taken in a judgment.
All right. All right. And again, this is a question I'm kind of dividing up a little bit between Tony and Chase. A lot of us are probably just doing captain work on our own. We might be doing charters. We might be doing deliveries or instructions. And Davis, you're in the league where you have employees. What happened? And April, too, feel free to join in. What happens when you go from being just you to having employees? What changes about your complexity in your business?
Well, I'll correct you. We do not have employees.
Oh, okay.
We have owners and we have contractors.
I see. Okay.
In fact, I
Okay.
spent this morning sending out my 1099s. So, but I think that is a very good question.
Yeah, I mean, once you add employees to the mix, then, Davis just said, it does add a level of complexity, right? There's new insurance requirements. There's things you got to watch out for. In Maryland, you might need unemployment insurance, for example, if you have employees. It's a lot more than just looking after. Closer? Is this better? Okay, great. So yeah, when you add employees, there's other things to consider. There's insurance mainly, I think, is a big one. And also just having contracts in place too sometimes. Maryland's an at-will state. So, getting contract doesn't necessarily get rid of that. But it could be good just to kind of clarify the scope of the employment and their duties, particularly when you're doing things like charters.
All right. All right. Thanks. So in just a few minutes, we've had the idea to start a business. We've got it organized. We've got all the structure set up, and we've got ourselves legally covered. So we're ready to go out and walk the docks and start looking for some clients. But wait a minute, we need to think about insurance. April, what do we need to think about as we're getting our business up on its feet?
Well, you want to make sure you have a proper limit of liability. There's a lot of requirements from marinas now. Most of the marinas in the area most of them are owned by Safe Harbor now, but the majority of them require 500,000 liability. So you have to comply with that. It gets a little difficult when you're a brand new charter operation to get high limits of liability because the carriers, because you're new, kind of like a new driver getting, newly licensed driver getting insurance. When you're new and you haven't had a captain's license very long, or you haven't been in the charter business before, they usually want to limit your liability the first year to like 300,000 or something. So we usually ask for a resume, and we can usually get you higher limits if you've got, a lot of people have good resumes. They've operated other people's boats, things like that. Another thing, you want to do is you want to make sure you have adequate coverage to cover your boat for property damage, in case you do have an occurrence. Question that gets asked every day, is, well, I have a crew. I have a mate on the boat. This is a very, very common question. Most of the charter boats most of them in the area are owner operated, but most of the fishing ones usually have crew. So there's a question that comes up, well, do I have to cover the crew because they're just paid tips? And most of the time we tell them it doesn't matter how they're paid, they're still being paid. And if they don't have proper coverage, they may not be eligible for Jones Act, which is basically a form and this is Chase's specialty, but that's basically a form of workers' comp coverage over the water. So, if they get injured and the boat's certified for 6 passengers and they're injured and there's 6 passengers on there, then where are they going to be covered? They're not going to be covered. And the insurance policy will not defend you to even determine whether they're eligible for Jones Act or not if you don't buy the coverage. So, those are the things that, we also talk to people about, alcohol use. We want them to limit the alcohol use, or they have to monitor the alcohol use, because we see a lot of claims because of people being intoxicated, things like that. So these are all things that we talk to you about, questions we ask you when you apply for a new policy. We ask you, are you serving and selling alcohol? That's a big deal. We want to know about that. Some boats get liquor liability, they get liquor liability coverage because the boat has a liquor license. So these are all things that, you want to kind of get straight before you call to get insurance, because those are the questions we're going to ask you.
All right. So, and interesting on the, point of alcohol, one thing I learned from Davis I hadn't thought of was that you might need, depending on the jurisdiction you're operating in, you might need a liquor license from the state. But how does that work if you're running the boat or you're doing a charter, but you're not providing or selling or giving away for free, but the passengers are bringing their own alcohol on board? Is there still insurance coverage or a consideration for that?
Some of the policies have liquor exclusions in them. Every policy is different.
Okay.
Basically, and then there's other policies that just say they're not going to cover an occurrence that due to someone being intoxicated, So, if you're selling and serving it, Chase can tell you, you're going to be legally liable anyway. You can be legally liable anyway, but selling and serving it's a lot bigger deal than just permitting people to bring a bottle of wine on the boat. And if when somebody answers the question, well, I allow them to bring their own. Oh, it's BYOB. It's still kind of sketchy because people can still get intoxicated. So we usually tell them that it has to be monitored, and a lot of the carriers will put a stipulation in there where they want you to monitor these boats for these passengers for intoxication, and that you will agree that when you see somebody intoxicated, that the boat will go back to the dock and the charter will end. Because we see so many horrible, unfair claims that occur due to alcohol use. Great captains, young charter boat captains. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Really great charter boat captains, will tell these passengers, especially on the fishing vessels, it happens the most on them because, they bring a cooler with them with a lot of drinks in them. And, they'll be told, oh my gosh, they'll be told to sit down and sit down. And they won't sit down. And then the next thing they're laying down because they fall. And guess what happens? The company, the insurance company pays out $200,000 for a broken rib, 200 grand. And then the charter captain can't get insurance for 5 years until that loss drops off. So it behooves you to monitor the alcohol use on your boats, just for obvious reasons.
All right. And all right. Great information. I think one of the takeaways is, you start having these conversations, you can get a little nervous, and rather than getting nervous about the business, I'm still excited about doing this. But I think for me, one of the takeaways is you got the policy document, you went to a broker and you selected a policy. I think one of the things I'm hearing is you really need to be very thoughtful about understanding that policy, probably having a conversation with your broker or.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to bring business to myself by any means, or toot my own horn, but you want to deal with somebody that has been doing charter insurance for a
Right.
long time, because not everybody knows commercial insurance policies, you know? And we have a lot of competition. Competition comes out of the woodwork every year. Well, somebody else, it's like, I mean, the gossip on the street right now is that Progressive is going to start covering charter boats. Yikes. I mean, that's scary. I mean, they still ask people for comp and collision coverage on a boat policy, which doesn't even exist. But you know, you want to deal with a company that has a track record for being in the charter insurance. Like, I mean, like Charter Lakes. I mean, we've been in business for like 45 years. We are the insurance people for NACO, which is the National Association of Charter Boat Operators. So we have a really good history of knowing what we're doing. I'm not going to say I know everything, but we have a good, we have a good reputation for knowing what we're doing. So you just want to make sure that you get a personal relationship with an agent, not just somebody that's going to take your information and plug it in and give you a quote. Somebody that's going to educate you and teach you things that you need to look for, tell you what coverages you're missing, things like that.
All right, good. So we talked about a couple different levels of operation, doing deliveries, starting up a company. For any of you, is there a difference whether you're running uninspected vessels, or do you cross a threshold when you go from 6-packs to inspected vessels of things from any point of view that we should be thinking about?
I mean, basically, they're quoted the same way. I mean, the coverages would be the same regardless. I mean, there's
Okay.
some differences in the way the navigation is worded on the policies. Like, say you have an inspected boat and you call for a Chesapeake Bay quote. Well, when we quote it, the navigation will say per COI. So basically, whatever the Coast Guard says supersedes anything that we
Okay.
say. I mean, if the Coast Guard says that the boat is capable of going 20 miles offshore, then the navigation follows the Coast Guard COI. But there's really not any real differences in the policies.
All right, so it just comes back to the point of you've got your policy document in hand, but you need to study the policy document very carefully, but you need to tie it in with your COR conditions
Yeah,
COI, I'm sorry. Yeah.
we ask for the
Yeah.
COI when we quote it because we want to see what the maximum, passenger limit is. And then we ask you what your average passenger limit is, because there's a lot of boats that are certified for 49 passengers, but on the daily they carry 12 passengers. So, they're rated accordingly,
All right, good.
And then we'll also like to see what the crew requirements are, because we need to make sure that the captain is carrying the proper amount of crew for the navigation.
Right. If you're on an inspected vessel, that you
That's
might have a crew requirement. Okay. I heard a term a few minutes ago that I'm becoming familiar with, but I think it's really important. And that can maybe Chase or somebody talk about, what does it mean to have a Jones Act employee, and what should we be thinking about as a captain when we have a Jones Act employee?
Yeah, so as April said earlier, Jones Act is basically sort of a workers' compensation scheme, but for what's known as a Jones Act seaman, and those are basically crew members, and it really is like workers' comp, only it honestly takes it up a notch. There are unique remedies that are afforded to Jones Act crew members. Those are maintenance and cure. Maintenance is basically a daily rate that the employer has to pay to that injured crew member until they reach their maximum medical improvement. There's no set rate as to what it is. You are able to change or describe that rate in a contract with the crew member. But, for example, going rates are usually about $40 a day. So $40 a day for, a year and a half until they reach their medical improvement, whatever their injury might be. There's also obligations of cure, which is paying for their medical expenses. A lot of these presumptions are against the employer and they arise without fault. So, if you don't provide a safe working environment on the ship, or if the ship is deemed to be unseaworthy for any reason, then you're going to be on the hook. And that's why it's really important to have Jones Act coverage, especially, if it's offered for, a small additional fee. Because if you don't have it but need it, you're going to be on the hook for really a whole lot of money. Not every crew member technically would qualify to be a Jones Act crew member. Oftentimes, what the law does is it wants to see if that crew member has like a permanent sort of attachment to that particular vessel. So if you have crew members who are just, back and forth on different boats and not really tied to one in particular, they might not be a crew member. But again, you don't want to be paying an attorney $100,000 in defense to figure that out. You want to have the insurance company pay for that bill. And so, get that coverage early on.
All right, and that's insurance, if you're the employer, that's insurance coverage that you can get that is not, and I presume that's not automatically. A boat owner comes to you and says, hey, I need insurance. They need to know to ask for that, or you need
Right.
to
If
know.
somebody,
Yeah.
people will call and say, well, a lot of people will call and say they're going to have an alternate captain. So say, for instance, they run the boat most of the time, but they have another captain that they want to use. I always encourage them to take crew coverage. And I get a lot of heat from it because they don't want to pay for it. And it's really not that expensive. I mean, if you have $1 million of liability coverage on your policy and you want to add an alternate captain, when that captain's running your boat, he's your employee. Basically, he's your employee. So you want to cover him for the Jones Act coverage. Otherwise, there's probably not going to be, there's not going to be any defense or any coverage. So usually we can offer sublimits because, $1 million of crew coverage is going to cost you maybe $700 a year. And for a business that's just starting out, that's a little bit steep, So we do offer sublimits of insurance, 100,000. And trust me, you're not really going to get much defense on 100,000 either, but it's better than zero, So I always encourage people to take that, and you can get 100,000 for, $350 a year, and it's worth the peace of mind because we see claims like we've had claims where a crew member has been pulled overboard by a white marlin. Wrapped the line around their hand and he died. Crew claims are, and I'm sure Chase could probably, interject on this, but crew claims can be really ugly claims. Fingers being cut off by fishing line, but fish pulling them in the water, especially the big ocean going, charter boats, things like that. So.
All right. And so that in that case, we're talking about crew members, but that risk could also apply to if you're running fishing charters, it's not the crew person, but it's the paying charter passenger. There's still, you would cover that in your a little bit different than employer liability.
Right. Well, charter passenger is just going to be covered under the P&I coverage, the protection and indemnity. They're going to be covered as a fare paying passenger, but the crew's something different. The crew, like Chase said, it's basically, you're going to be paying for his lost wages for however long he's out of commission. And God forbid he dies, you're going to be paying for his funeral expenses and his death benefits as well. So,
Right. Okay. But what I understand is in the research that I've done so far to get myself up and running, there is one important consideration that can help protect you here. I think a lot of the cases we're talking about here, you're the boat owner, you've hired the crew to go out and do the fishing charter. But here, I think it might come in more into the delivery business. I'm sure a lot of you do deliveries to some extent. And help me out on this. My understanding was boat owner hires you, get my boat from point A, get my boat from Fort Lauderdale back up to Annapolis, and he pays you the going rate. But my understanding was that it's preferable to have you refer crew to the owner, but then have the owner hire the crew. Doesn't that get you out from some of the Jones Act liability?
Well, so delivery captains are a little different. Usually when I mean, we get a lot of calls, and I know you're familiar with this insurance program that I told you know, that we talked about
Right.
through Gallagher. We get a lot of calls from captains who are running other people's boats, and they'll, the boat owner will say, well, you know, you need to get insurance. Well, most of the time, it's a temporary thing. It's not, they're not acting as a full-time captain to that boat, and they're not reporting solely to that boat. They're
Okay.
just doing a delivery from Florida to Maryland. Okay. Most of the time, what needs to be done is they just need, the owner of the boat needs to add the captain, add crew coverage to their policy to cover the captain for that period of time. And it's very minimal cost to do that. Then there are other times where people will say, well, I want some coverage I want some protection for myself. I mean, adding the captain provides coverage for the owner of the boat if the captain does something, you know, and
Right.
wrecks the boat. Okay. But if a captain wants to get coverage to protect himself, then they need a professional liability policy, which they call it captain's legal liability. Sorry, my mouth is so dry. So, you know, Gallagher, we do have an agent at Gallagher that provides coverage for those types of risk, which is basically a professional liability. So it's kind of similar to like what a doctor would have, or a you know, a hairdresser
Right,
or something like that. But that's for people that are not just doing an occasional delivery trip from one point to another. That is somebody that is running boats up and down for people every day. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Next, please.
If I may,
Please do.
you know, one of the things that Bob mentioned earlier on was, you know, making the crew member someone who's not employed by you, the delivery captain, by the owner. And so, and that's a great suggestion. And that's what we often advise clients to do. So if you're doing, for example, a delivery voyage, and you know you're going to need, you know, one or two more hands to take this boat from, you know, point A to point B. One of the things that you don't want to do is have that, you know, first mate or whomever you know who's helping you out be considered your crew. Because again, you know, you might get into trouble and turns out they're considered a Jones Act crew member, and now you're paying them a bunch of money for the next year and a half or more. So what you can do is, instead of the crew member being someone who's, you know, deemed to be employed by you, you have a contract with the boat owner for your delivery, and you have a separate contract between the boat owner and your friend, and it makes it clear that the boat owner is employing that friend as the crew member, and it's all on the boat owners, you know, to pay the bill. So if you know, your friend gets hurt, it's not your fault. It's going to be the boat owners. And that's a really easy way, really without even getting you know, insurance involved, just to limit your own liability. Now, when it comes to the insurance side of things, again, as April mentioned, a lot of captains, they tend to just kind of ride on the policy of the boat owner. And a lot of times what's really good to do is to get a certificate of insurance before you start the voyage. Make sure that you're going to be, you know, added as insured. Above and beyond that, you can get your own policy, because, you know, there are a lot of ways for marine insurers to wiggle out of coverage. And even if you're added on that policy, maybe there's something that the owner didn't do, or a warranty he didn't comply with, and it turns out, well, you don't have coverage either. So, you know, getting your own independent policy is always, you know, not a bad idea. I haven't seen a whole lot of captains right now do that, but it's a service that's out there, and I think April can, you know, talk about more, you know, as needed. And then another thing too to keep in mind is, when it comes to marine insurance, there is what's known as duty of utmost good faith, and that really applies, you know, not to you, the captain, if you're going to be on someone's policy, but to the extent that you're getting your own, it will be applicable. And what that means is, when you're applying for marine insurance, any sort of material misrepresentation, even if accidental, will void the policy from its inception. So when you're dealing with brokers like April, you know, don't you know, struck the truth at all. You know, you gotta always be truthful, because the marine insurer will find out down the road, and they will deny coverage when that comes every day.
All right. All right. All right, good. Excellent points. And when and actually Chase helped me do my setup, and I got several contract templates. I got one for me and the boat owner. In my particular business, I won't be doing charters, but I'll just be going on a boat, hopefully to do some instruction. What was very helpful is you give me a contract template that I can give to the owner, but then you also gave me a crew contract template. So for the situation Chase described, you want to do a delivery, you have a delivery contract with the owner, but then you tell the owner, well, you need to hire the crew. For all the reasons that were covered. Having that template, that owner might say, well, that sounds complicated. I don't want to do that. But the contract template I was given, I just hand that to the owner. The owner fills in the blanks. And then the owner's got the crew hired. The owner takes care of paying. And should an injury happen, it doesn't happen a lot, but they happen. Then that's the owner's responsibility. And about additional insurance, I retired from a business career. It wasn't in the maritime field, but I did some amount of insurance work, and it was always really important to. I found it was very easy to do when people I was working with in a slightly different setting needed to be added to the policy as an additional insured. It didn't cost anything. I just had to provide it to the broker. The broker issued, as you said, an insurance certificate I could give to the person and said, for this particular period of time, for this particular purpose, that you, the crew member, are brought, or the captain are brought onto the insurance policy. And help me out on this. I understood that was probably one of the most important things you could do, is to get onto that owner's policy.
Yeah, definitely making sure you're on the policy. And look, it's always a good idea, even if the owner, you trust them, they say, yeah, you're added, or the policy covers you automatically. Always get the certificate, especially because if you're doing a delivery voyage, you don't know what the navigational limits are. Again, it's of no use to you if you're on the policy, but the policy isn't going to cover you because you went outside the navigational limits or something else went awry. So always making sure that you have that certificate, that you see that you're on it, and that you know that your voyage at least is compliant with the face of the certificate. Those are all really good, easy ways to kind of protect you and limit your liability from the outset. Another thing too, there are a lot of policies, Chubb comes to mind, that will, in a lot of cases, automatically sort of add you as an additional assured. I have had cases where charter captains, are doing deliveries, and there is, some sort of collision or elision, there's an accident, and, insurance covers, but of course the owner has a, big deductible. And the owner several times has come after the captain for that deductible. And thankfully, because they are added on the policy just automatically as an additional assured, it's real simple. We make a phone call to the carrier and say, we're now asking you to appoint defense counsel to defend against your named insured's claim. And in one phone call, the whole case goes away. Sometimes the carrier ignores things for a while, and then we tell them, we've now spent $10,000 in attorney's fees, and you got to pay us back for that too. And then when they realize they made a mistake, then they send a check for that as well. So, the bottom line is, when it comes to insurance, just making sure you're covered one way or the other. It's a tremendous amount of peace of mind, and it's the easiest way to kind of protect your bottom dollar.
I was just going to add, from our perspective as a charter business, we have had all of our captains added to our insurance, and it's a very simple process. We actually insure with Charter Lakes Gallagher. We'll send them the resume, and in almost every case, they wrote back and said, yes, they're covered. In one case, they said, no, we want to see that they have crewed on that vessel a few times. Yes, they've got their license, but they haven't had it but a couple of years, and we want a little bit more background there. And yeah, so after a couple of times, and I would do that anyway, just so any of you got to know the boat and how we work. So it was no issue at all. And we wrote them and said, here are the 3 weekends they helped as crew, and they were added to our policy. So very simple procedure, and it did not cost anything additional, because you have to assume that a boat has to have a captain. And
right. Okay. Those are encouraging words to hear, that it was simple and it didn't cost anything. Because I think you all are providing a lot of expertise, and I'm kind of looking around the room to see if anybody's feeling like, oh, this is, now that I know what's involved in this. But I hope the takeaway would be the opposite, not to feel more concerned, but to feel more confident that, if you don't already know what questions to ask and how to kick the tires and think about coverage. So here's an interesting thing that, as I was getting my business set up, maybe Chase, but others, how important is it when if you're doing charters or deliveries in particular, to have written contracts. When you're hiring yourself out as the captain, you agree on a dollar amount and what you're going to do. Some people will do this on a handshake basis, but between a handshake basis and a written contract, what do we need to think about?
Yeah, so it's always good to have a written contract in place, right? I mean, if you just do it on a handshake deal, then if you ever have a dispute, it's just a he said, she said, and who's more trustworthy, and then you got to fight about it. It's a lot easier if you have a written contract that says here's how much you're owed, here's the terms of the voyage. Contracts, especially when it comes to like insurance, for example, you can put in the contract that the owner is required to add you as a named assured. If the owner doesn't, the owner is now responsible for paying you back for all the legal fees you might pay defending yourself. That's not really something you're going to get in a handshake deal. Talking about crew, for example, one of the things we discussed was having crew be paid by the owner separately and not be employed by you directly. You don't really do that if you have a handshake deal. So those are the things you can put into writing in contracts. A lot of these contracts aren't that long. They're about a page, 2 pages. The crew contract, for example, can be just 1 page, and you can just hand it to the owner and say, here's, Bill, he's my friend, and I need him for the voyage. You need to employ Bill. Put in a few blanks and sign it, and you're good to go. Again, if you don't have a contract in place, that's all going to be really difficult to prove. Another thing that contracts help with are liens, right? If you furnish these types of services for vessels and you get stiffed, you could, if you so wanted to, arrest the vessel in federal court, satisfy your maritime lien. A lot harder to do that if you don't have a written instrument that says, what you did and how you did it, and that it's signed by the owner. So, contracts help in a lot of different ways. Just doing it on a handshake it's risky business.
If I can add from a charter business perspective, that's one of the reasons I alluded to different reservation systems. We went with one that the reservation itself becomes a contract between the client and the business. It also has a waiver system that the client separately electronically signs a waiver saying we're not liable. I don't know how good those are in court. I'm always told that they're worthless, but it helps. Similarly, I think a lot of us do Boat Setter or Get My Boat or those things. Those programs have that same kind of contractual liability waiver built into that reservation. Whereas if Bob calls me up and say, hey, you want to take some clients out on my boat? I don't have any of that. I don't have any of that protection. So despite the big corporate nature of some of these systems, they do provide some help on those regards.
All right.
And, certainly relevant for running a charter business. The contract can also make it clear what type of charter you have. If you're just doing a delivery, you're probably not really worried about, what charter type there is, but really you have 2 main charter types. You have the bareboat charter, and you have the time charter or the voyage charter. And in a bareboat charter, for it to be an actual valid bareboat charter, you got to give the whole of the vessel. And that includes, it's basically like handing over the keys to the boat. That person is considered the owner pro hoc vice, which is basically, owner for this matter. And they have to have the right to pick the captain, pick the crew. If you are the one to basically say, here's the boat, you get to rent it all and it's yours for the time being. But by the way, you have to have this captain. It's not going to be a valid bareboat charter. And, whether or not something is bareboat can affect a lot of, the liability of the owner. And it can also affect, passenger limits for whether, if most vessels probably aren't going to be inspected. And so if it's not a bareboat, you might be looking at a 6-pack versus, the 12-person limit.
All right. So the question about, okay, so we've covered a lot of good territory on contracts. I'm coming back a little bit to the business life I retired from, again, not in the maritime world, but a lot of contracting, a lot of negotiation and arguments over limitation of liability clauses in contracts. And somebody mentioned, I don't know who it was, but mentioned a really good point that those are not a solid brick wall. Your people can still push a claim through and sue you. Can either of you talk a little bit more about what happens when somebody tries to push past that limitation of liability?
When there's a claim, everybody's they try to sue everybody. It's like when I don't know, somebody's running a lawnmower and a rock spins up and hits a kid
Yeah.
in the eye. They sue the person cutting the grass. They even sue the manufacturer of the of the lawnmower. Some carriers concept is one of them. They have a waiver of liability that they require on every
Right.
passenger boat. I mean, we can't insure a charter boat with them unless the owner of the boat has and this is a pain because people don't like to deal with it, but they require that every passenger that boards the boat signs the liability waiver
Yeah.
release. And they have to retain it for 7 years on file. They have to keep it. And it's such a pain, and we get a lot of heat about that. Nobody wants to do it. But I mean, does it prevent them from being sued? No, right, Jason? Definitely does not prevent you from being sued, but it certainly can help, the end result. So I hope I answered that question right.
No, that's very
Okay.
helpful. So yeah, these things are the limitation of liability clauses, the written contracts. None of these are bulletproof vests.
No.
People are going to insurance companies and others are going to try to push past those defenses, but help me out here. I think you're a wise captain to build as many of these defenses in.
Yep,
as you,
absolutely.
as you think about your business. So, okay. I think we've covered a few other things. I was going to talk a little bit about deliveries, but let me just pull that thread just a little more. We kind of got into that topic. Are there any other? I mean, a lot of us might be doing charter work. Typically, you're doing charter work out in the bay. You're taking clients out for a day fishing or for an enjoyable day of sailing. What other considerations are there when you start moving a boat a long distance for an owner who's not on board? Yeah. I just wonder how the business model changes or how your captain business planning might change a little bit.
Here's an example. And this wasn't strictly done with, a delivery where you pick up the boat and take it from somewhere else. But I recently had a client who bought a brand new catamaran. It was built probably somewhere out in Vietnam, and it was shipped to the U.S. and it was foreign flagged. And the company who built the boat, or actually sold it, wasn't the same as the manufacturer. They had their own delivery captain who went out to the port of Norfolk and picked it up and took it to Annapolis. Problem is, you can't just do that because it's not a U.S. vessel. It didn't clear customs, and that created a huge issue, even of potential criminal liability, both for the delivery captain and my client, because all of a sudden there was a foreign boat that left Norfolk without customs permission. So, if you're going to be, a delivery captain, and you have, maybe some of these international voyages or just taking boats from point A to point B, you might want to be mindful of where it's flagged. For example, if it's going to, be something that's not a U.S. flagged vessel, you're probably going to have to make sure that you're on the CBP Rome app. And if you have a cruising permit, check in and out on the app. If you don't have a cruising permit, you got to check in and out of every, sort of port you enter on the way. So there are considerations like that. Probably most vessels you'll be on will be U.S. documented, and that won't apply. But just kind of keep that on your radar because it almost burned someone pretty bad last year.
All right. One of the good pieces, and Chase, your firm's head, Todd Lochner, spoke to CAPCA maybe 2 years ago about this, and one of the things that I wouldn't have thought about, not that I'm doing deliveries, is to get a credit card authorization from the owner so that you're not fronting your own money for provisions and fuel. It's a little detail I wouldn't have thought about.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good point. We've had some delivery captains, go to the vessel. They arrive at the vessel, and it turns out it is not in the state that the owner said it would be in. It requires a lot of work, and yeah, exactly. Shocker. And the captain spends a few days getting the vessel ready to go on the voyage, and they don't have the credit card of the owner. They spend their own money, and the intention is that it gets reimbursed. And you get to where it needs to go, and the owner stiffs you. And now you're not only not paid for your voyage, but now you're out a few $1,000s of expenses. And that's a problem that's easily solved if you have the owner give you a credit card at the beginning and say, these are this is for me to use for all the vessel expenses, fuel, provisions, etc. So it's a really easy way to help not be out of pocket a bunch of money.
All right, all right. Good.
Sorry.
April, please.
This probably seems trivial, but if you're going to someone else's boat, it's a good idea to have a copy of their policy, because there are navigation limits on the policy. There's mileage offshore limitations, and you definitely don't want to get into a situation where you're going to breach the navigation, because if a claim occurs, there won't be any coverage. So it really would benefit you to make sure they have insurance and make sure that you're following the limits of navigation. You cannot believe what people do. You really cannot believe it. I mean, people will purchase a Chesapeake Bay navigation policy and just get up and have a captain move the boat to Florida and not even tell us, and then call us and say, "Oh yeah, we need coverage for Florida," and we're like, "Oh yeah, when are you leaving?" "Oh, well, it's already there." And this happens all the time. So you want to make sure that if you're taking charge of the boat, that you're following the insurance.
All right, good. So we're gonna get our CAPCA captains so well organized and prepared that'll never be a line from this group. All right, so we've got some questions building up online. We've got a lot of people in the room. It's a great turnout. I think we're going to start with some online questions, but we're good on time, and we will get as best as we can to everybody's questions. So Dave, are you feeding questions that are building up in the chat room?
So one question that came up on the licensing and the insurances, what protection is there for captains operating as a 1099? So if you're a 1099 captain working for someone else or moving a boat or working for Captain Davis, what protections do we have?
Yeah. So if you're a 1099, right, and you're working for, really on the vessel, right, your crew, then you might still qualify for Jones Act coverage, or, even if there isn't insurance coverage, Jones Act remedies. I mean, you can still try and get the vessel owner to pay you your maintenance, your cure, your unearned wages. Aside from that, you still probably have all the other remedies you might otherwise have at law, even if you're just 1099. I mean, if you get hurt and someone's negligent, there's a lawsuit right there waiting to happen. As far as insurance goes, there's probably a good chance that you might be covered under the policy. It just depends on what the policy says.
The only thing is if the owner of the vessel, you're talking about operating someone else's vessel, right? If the owner of the vessel did not buy the crew coverage, the policy will not defend to even determine whether you're eligible for Jones Act or not. So that's key.
Cheryl, do we have somebody who could walk the mic around? Oh, just have them come to the podium? Okay.
Thank you all for being here tonight. It is informative.
Close-
If you're
close to the
a
mic, please.
1099 captain and you're not injured, but there's some accident, what kind of protection do you have against liability? Does the coverage on the boat convey to you as a 1099 employee operating under the owner's responsibility or under the owner's permission?
Specific policy, it'll depend on the specific policy, because certain policies include a paid captain as an insured party. Otherwise, they would have to be approved as a captain to operate the boat for the liability coverage to be extended.
So could we buy professional liability insurance as independent contractors that would be enforced at that time?
Yes, you can. There's a program through Gallagher, with Coverage Pros 365, I believe. Our company offers it. We don't, my office doesn't offer it, or Charter Lakes doesn't offer it. It's another branch of Gallagher, but it's very, very inexpensive. I mean, the last I checked, it was probably under $700 a year for the policy. It's really worth having,
Thank you.
especially, sure.
And can I just add a little bit to that, please, to April's point? CAPCA has a number of business resources on the CAPCA website. I will say over the next few months, we're starting to go through those and make sure they're all up to date and current, but there are a number of discounts and a number of programs in there. So to April's point, there are 2 insurance offerings in there, and they are current. And depending on which one you talk to, you can get licensed defense coverage at a minimum, and one of those 2 carriers also offers additional liability protection, and that's a Gallagher affiliate that does that. So I'd call your attention to those resources. Let's see, can we take one more? Can we just rotate Dave between in the Zoom and in-person questions? Dave, do we have the next one keyed up for?
Yeah, another question coming from online. For small operators, someone moving a handful of boats a year, doing it legally under a contract and with their license, do they need to start a business?
As in like a formal business entity, or I guess I'll assume so. So the answer is yes. I mean, if you're going to even be doing small work, when it comes to boats, I mean, it's bust out another 1,000. The amount of money that can be put at stake is pretty tremendous. If even if you're only doing a few deliveries a year, it's probably beneficial. In fact, it is beneficial probably to have some sort of formal entity set up and to actually start running it like a business. Anything you can do to get additional liability protection is a good thing. So adding that extra layer, the LLC, go for it.
All right. Thank you.
I have 2 related questions about crew. One would be, is there any family exclusions if you're a sole member LLC and for instance, your direct family members such as father operates as a part-time captain? The other question is, if you had delivery crew that was hired by the boat owner, does that prevent you from taking any money? For instance, I've done a lot of deliveries and I'll charge $350 a day to the boat owner and pay the crew $250 a day. If I take any of that money, does that make me an employer and then link me into some kind of legal dispute?
Yeah. So I think in the circumstances you just described, if you are working, even if it's an oral contract, for example, with the actual vessel owner, and you have crew that you're paying, they're going to be considered your crew.
Right, but if I move to the situation where you're talking about where they pay them directly,
Mhm.
is there a way that I could profit off of that some way and not be legally bound to that?
I see what you're saying, which is basically, can you somehow get a cut of what they're paying?
More of long-term
Right. Yeah, I think that'd be a little difficult to do. Just because if you start kind of taking, part of what they're getting, then you're really going to kind of put them back into the,
Then you
they're
become an
your
employer.
they're your crew basket,
Okay.
and you might find yourself, liable for them.
How about the for the short-term day charters? Is there any kind of family exclusion, legally speaking?
Like on the insurance side, or
Either way.
can you ask your question again, just so I?
So I'm starting a tour business and I'm planning on operating it 100% on my own.
Mhm.
However, if it gets rolling, I was planning on licensing my father to take some of the weekday shifts. He's retired.
Okay.
Is there any kind of family exclusion to that?
I wouldn't.
There should be licenses regularly.
Right.
They just have to be listed.
Okay. Cool. Thank you very much.
Dave, next online.
Sure. All right. So believe it or not, some of us actually do sail for fun. So if a member is a member at a boat club or sailing with a friend and they're not working, they're just out having a good day, what can they do to protect themselves from liability of being the most qualified person at the scene of the problem?
I think the short answer is yes. It does add some level of responsibility. I mean, when you have any sort of negligence claim, right, the standard of care that you're held to is sort of someone kind of in your position, right? And normally it's an ordinary person, reasonable person. But if you have a special license, or for example, like attorneys, right, they're held to a higher standard of care. CPAs are held to a higher standard of care because they have certain licenses. So it's not just, would an ordinary person do this thing? Oh, would an ordinary attorney do this thing? And when you have a captain's license, you might be able to make the argument that, would an ordinary, captain do this thing? So, yeah, you might need to be a bit more careful on the water than just the regular boater. I don't think you need to be, too much more careful, but if you're a licensed and you're a licensed captain, you really should know better on some of these things. And I think if you're just doing what you should be doing, you should be okay.
Evening. It's been my understanding that foreign built boats, whether it's for a six pack or for a demise contract, doing a contract, that way. So, is there a problem with that? I see an awful lot of catamarans around here and Beneteaus, they're not made in this country, many of them doing charters, and it's like, are we all just looking the other way, or is there a problem?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. So just to give you everyone here some background, if you're going to do a time charter in the U.S., the boat has to have what's known as a coastwise endorsement, and to get a coastwise endorsement, it has to be built in the U.S. Now there is an exception. You can get a small vessel waiver through MARAD. It's not terribly expensive to do. There is a little bit of a wait period, and no guarantee you'll get it. The boat has to be at least 3 years old to qualify. Now, even if you can't do time charters with the vessel because it's foreign built and doesn't have a waiver, you could do bareboat charters. So that's one way to get around the time charter prohibition, is do the bareboat charters. And there are creative ways that you can frame the bareboat charter to basically give you, what you would otherwise want out of a time charter. You can strongly suggest the captain. Again, you can't force him to pick the captain of the crew, but you can say, look, my insurance company will only let, this select number of captains on the boat. You can pick one of these, 3, or if you have your own that you want to bring on the boat, you have to go get my insurance company to approve them first. Most people aren't going to go through the hassle. They'll pick your captain, but you still have a bareboat charter. But otherwise, there are people who do, sometimes don't follow the law, and they don't always, adhere to the coastwise endorsement requirements. But people who want to do this right, they might go out and they might buy a beautiful new boat at the boat show, and it's foreign built, and they come to our office and say, hey, we want to do this charter company, and the answer is come back in 3 years because it's foreign built and can't get coastwise, and there's no waiver option until 3 more years. And they leave crying because they already have a mortgage on the vessel and it's too late to do anything else. So excellent question. Definitely some
So
pitfalls.
MARAD waiver is pretty much rubber stamped, or is it a difficult process or
The small vessel waiver?
expensive?
It's not very expensive. It's basically what you do is you publish notice in the Federal Register, and I don't know, 6 months ish. It kind of depends on how long it takes, but
I always told it was an act of Congress and you had to get, somebody to,
No.
sign off.
no, fortunately not an act of Congress, but you do have to publish notice in the register, and theoretically people can object to it. For a while, one of the things our office was doing was leaving out New York Harbor. And the reason was because there was someone in New York Harbor who didn't want to have any foreign built vessels doing, even risking having them come up there and do charters in New York. And they would object every time, and MARAD would deny the application. So we just started just doing everything but New York Harbor, and that got through. I think that whoever that person was isn't doing that anymore. But it's not a terribly involved process. It's just some notice, and you wait, and eventually, hopefully, you get it.
And just as a note of clarification, something somewhat related on a bareback charter, demise contracts that you're going to have a contract for the boat, you're going to have a contract for the captain, 2 separate contracts.
Absolutely. Yep.
And also, I think I know the answer to this, but maybe this is kind of a nuance. You read the paperwork, as far as I understand, it covers 12 people plus the person who set up the charter. So you can actually have 13 guests on board along with the captain and whatever the crew.
Yeah, that's correct. And so, the 12-person limit's interesting. It all kind of started because in 1993, there was the Passenger Vessel Act, or whatever it was called. And what that did was it tried to close the loophole people were using back in the day of using a bareboat for everything. And, no one needed a captain's license. There was no oversight because, well, we just bareboat it and we're all good. So after that, they closed some loopholes. And what the Coast Guard did is, in addition to the actual, statute that did all this loophole closing, they issued what's known as NAVIC 794. And that describes, what is and what is not as the Coast Guard looks at it, a valid bareboat charter. And of course, the bareboat limit for these things is 12 passengers. Once you go over that limit, you can find yourself in real hot water. There are cases where captains, either have their merchant marital credentials suspended or revoked because they went over and now they're outside of the statutory exception. So, the quick answer is yes. The actual charterer is usually excluded from the 12-person limit. But definitely be mindful of that limit because if you go over, you could really find yourself in hot water.
All right, thanks. So, stand by. I want to go to the next online question. I wanted to ask a quick follow-up for my own clarification. So the coastwise endorsement applies to time charters, but not to bareboat or demise charters.
That's correct.
Is that right?
You don't need a coastwise
Right, okay.
endorsement to do a bareboat.
Okay, I don't mind telling you, I'm learning just as much as you all are. So, all right, stand by for just a minute. But can we, Dave, go to the next question in the box, please?
We'll lighten it up a little bit. Hopefully we never have to see you, Chase. Not that we don't like you.
Yeah, don't take it personally.
But question for you, Captain Davis, on the marketing and promotion side of your business. You said it's a skill set you had to learn.
Is there a specific question or just talk about it?
Speak to it.
No, I am not a marketer. I don't feel like I am marketed to effectively because I ignore ads but it is very important and because that's the way you reach people. We're in Rock Hall. If any of you have ever been to Rock Hall, people don't just drop by. So we have to get them into town. That's one of the downsides of being there instead of Annapolis. The upside is it's half the price. But really trying to figure out how social networking or social media works, how to target different Google ads to particular zip codes and things. You really do need some expertise in that, or at least to find someone that has that, because it has made a huge difference over the years as we've kind of established our online footprint that does draw people in. It's not just referrals, and it's certainly not people walking down the dock.
All right, all right.
I did want to mention something about the marketing that's relevant to insurance. When you're setting up your website, be very careful about pictures that you put on the website and what you advertise, because insurance underwriters always ask for your website and they always look at your website and they look at your Facebook. And when they ask the question about the alcohol and you say, oh, no, we don't really serve or sell or whatever, they go right to the website. And I just gave a new charter, Mike, I gave him the same advice. Be very careful because, one of the things we ask now with these big charter boats that do a lot of fishing is we ask them about, do they fish for shark? Because there's been some pretty ugly claims with sharks up on the boat, and, biting people, they'll say, no, we don't fish for shark. And then we'll go to their website and there's a picture of them holding a big shark up, And then the other thing is we'll ask them about the alcohol, and the insurance underwriter will go right to the website and they can see the boat is moving. As I said to Mike the other day, they can see the boat's moving and there are people sitting out on the bow of the boat with drinks in their hand. And I mean, alcoholic beverages in their hand, and the boat's moving, and the next thing you know, we get the decline. No, we're not interested. So when you do set your website up, you don't want to put too much in there about booze cruises or, got to be careful with the bachelorette parties, things like that, because sometimes you can have a really difficult time getting insurance if you put that stuff on there. So I just wanted to mention that.
Right. And I think that ties back to an earlier point. Very good advice. Be careful about what images you post. But two, one of you said it at least once, you have to be honest and disclose what you're really doing, because if you don't, your coverage may not be void. So, okay, and thank you for being patient. On to the next one.
So two questions. One on the alcohol. So I do a lot of charters on, not my own boat, other people's boats, sailboats, bareboat charters up to 12. And a big problem we have is with alcohol. I've had to turn one boat back, but I'm the only one on there. So you say monitoring the alcohol consumption. I'm really responsible for the safe navigation of the vessel. And if I have time, I'm looking out, what are they doing? And in this particular case, I knew it was going to be a problem, and most of you probably know this too. When you see them loading the booze on the boat, and it's not beer, it's alcohol. And so then I give them a lecture about that. But the decision where when I made the determination to terminate the charter, I'm on a sailboat that does 6 knots. I'm in the bay. I still have another hour and 20 minutes with these people on who are now not happy with me. And I'm one captain and 12 passengers. So I don't know any of you have recommendations for that, advice.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. You're the captain. You're responsible for the safe navigation of the vessel, and that includes, if you have a bunch of drunk guests, they might get in the way of that, and you need to terminate the charter. Having a contract in place that kind of spells that out from the beginning,
Yes.
it will make them any happier with you on an hour and a half journey back to the dock. But at least you have something you can point to and say, you guys agreed that if you guys got belligerent and got too drunk to be here, I could end this thing.
Gotcha.
So
Okay. Second question. I do private instruction on other people's boats. And so, I'm pretty much an advisor. But what about insurance for that? Should I make sure that I'm on their insurance policy, or is it implied because I am just a guest of theirs, but they're paying me?
I mean, we write policies for people that are doing boat instruction. I mean, there's policies, and I believe the professional liability policy that we talked about would cover something like that as well.
So I'm not covered on theirs.
You would be covered under theirs if they add you
They don't
as a
have to add-
captain. Yeah,
Okay.
you could be covered under their policy.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
You're specifically training them, the owner, right?
Correct.
Because we have a lot of captains do some of our carriers require captain's proficiency sign-offs. And so we'll give and this is for an owner that doesn't have doesn't have adequate experience to operate the boat. We'll insure them with a named captain warranty on the policy stating that they can't operate the boat until they received proficiency training from a captain. So we add you as the captain that's doing the training to their policy.
So that's another question.
Okay.
So I've been in situations like that, and after 2 hours they want me to sign off with my
No.
license,
Yeah.
and there's no way. On other ones, and you could tell that the people are not good to take out the boat. On other ones, they just needed some docking on docking. They're pretty proficient, but I've seen it in some insurance policies where they tell the owner you're not able to operate the vessel unless you have a
That's right.
licensed captain, and you need 100 hours.
Yes.
In other cases, it may just say, you need some instructions, sign off on navigation, these 4 topics, which are very open-ended, something like 100 hours. That makes.
Yeah, I haven't seen any with 100 hours, but I mean, depending upon what you're buying, like I have people that buy 70-foot boats and it's their first boat. I mean, they're not going to get a captain's proficiency sign off. They're going to have a licensed captain requirement on the policy for a minimum of 1 year. And sometimes there's a licensed captain requirement forever, because a lot of the carriers, once the boat reaches 65 feet, they want a captain on it because it's too much for one person to handle, but we do see with some carriers that it's like 40 hours of training. And then what we do is we give them a log with all of the training requirements, and the captain goes through all of those different steps with them. Once the captain feels they are proficient, I mean, some people may be proficient in 8 hours and some people may take 60 hours. you as the captain shouldn't sign off on the proficiency unless you are certain they are proficient. And that doesn't really, and I've never seen the insurance company come back at you and say, well, they just had a claim and you said they were proficient. We don't really see that happening, but I mean, because it's an accident. It can happen whether you're proficient. We've had licensed captains, excellent licensed captains run up on the jetty in Hilton Head, South Carolina. I mean, it's just stuff happens,
Great, thanks.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. We're going to take, I think we have time to do, we have one more in the box, Dave. Is that right? And then we have one more person waiting. We're going to absolutely get your question. So can we do the online question, please? And by the way, we're going to have a little bit of show where Cheryl is is it the door prize or the raffle we have after this? So don't go away. Dave.
So you've talked quite a bit about civil liability protection. Can you speak to Seaman's manslaughter statute?
So I will say that our office doesn't do any criminal. We have had clients where, they are criminally indicted for something as well as civilly, sued. In those instances, we always basically just get, local criminal counsel to advise on sort of those issues. It is out there. It's, it's a crime, right? I mean, but in that instance, I would basically tap criminal counsel to help you with that. Sorry, I don't have a better answer to that. But.
All right, thank you. And one more question.
Hi, guys. Thank you for your time. I do charters in Baltimore Harbor, and I also organize trips internationally. And so I've gone to, the Mediterranean and the Caribbean. And I want to know what my insurance covered, what type of insurance I should have, and my liabilities when I got through coming from the United States and going over there.
International.
I organized trips, and say last year we went to the French Riviera. And so we chartered a boat, bareboat charter, and everybody came together and we went sailing around. But I wanted to know what those liabilities. I mean, how can I protect myself as far as if something happens? Do I have insurance coverage in Italy?
International voyages, I think, right?
Yeah. So, So when you bareboat charter the boat, so it's you and you have
I'm licensed captain,
right.
Another captain, if it's another local captain.
Right. Okay. So a lot of times when you have a bareboat situation, you can either get your own insurance for the voyage. It kind of depends on the parameters of the bareboat. And if you're going to bareboat charter a vessel for a term of 3 years, you might get your own insurance policy. If you're doing
just a weekly,
right, exactly. So if it's just going for a week-long voyage, what often we'll do, and it's going to kind of depend on what the bareboat charter agreement says. A lot of times, the owner will just add you all as an additional assured or ensure that the coverage the owner has covers that type of bareboat charter. You want to make sure that it's not just a simple recreational policy where there's no cover for charters, because then if something goes wrong, you won't be covered. Obviously, you could take out your own insurance policy if you so chose. Might not be feasible to do if you're only taking it out for a week and you guys are asking brokers to get you a policy. But that's usually what you look for. If you are relying on the owner's insurance, make sure that you are as a named assured. That way you know that you're going to be covered, not just relying on the policy and its wording to add you automatically. And also look at the navigational limits. Make sure it's going to cover where you're going.
One other question, as far as, does it make a difference if your boat is documented, U.S. document? I'm saying here in regular in the States.
Yeah, it absolutely does. If you're running a time charter and you need to be coastwise, you kind of have to be U.S. documented, because that's the only way you're going to get a coastwise endorsement. And that also kind of plays into the foreign flag, right, with the other charter question, which is how do you run time charters on a foreign boat? The answer is you don't, unless you have a waiver. That will otherwise kind of get you that coastwise enforcement in a manner of speaking. So a lot of times if you're doing charter work, you're probably going to want to have a documented vessel as opposed to one that's just state titled.
All right. Well, thanks very much. I think we've wrapped up all of all the questions we're going to have time for. I hope the panelists won't mind if I impose on you. You'll probably be here for a few minutes. If somebody didn't get a question answered, please come on up. And hopefully you'll take away some really good resources.
And Hillary, when you can, go back to the slide deck, but oh my gosh, we could have been here for a lot longer. And look how many people are still here. And people came from more than a 2-hour drive for some of this, from some of the people I talked to. So cannot thank you enough for everything. And Bob, what a great job moderating. Oh my goodness. So we do have some thank you gifts for you. And for those of you in the room, and I know there are a couple who have spoken here before, we have upped our thank you gifts. So we're hoping you enjoy that. Speaking into the microphone, Bob, I'll ask you to hand these to our panelists, but we hope you enjoy this duffel. So each of you get one, and then we will send one to Tony, who was not able to be here. But we appreciated him preparing for that. He did have a medical emergency, so very thankful. So thank you so very, very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes. And yes.
Okay. Next, if you can advance to the next slide. Next one. Saying thank you. Good. Next one. All right. Time for your door prize. Ben, it's your time to come up. All right. Our door prize has been generously donated. And here Ben comes. Ben is from Oasis Lighthouse Marina in Baltimore. And I will tell you, the image you see there was taken from my boat last year when I stayed for a delightful 4th of July weekend. And I can tell you, it is an awesome marina. So, all right, so let's speak here.
Thank you all for having us here again, and Cheryl for visiting us and getting the ball rolling last year. And we'd love to see each and every one of you here. We have slips for everybody. Yes, so we have the brand new docks, full construction, just finished last January. Every slip has an in-slip pump out, composite decking across the entire marina. Every slip has a pump out. Yep. Yes, yeah, we are taking pussers from you this season. They'll be joining us starting Memorial Day is their planned opening date. So the famous Painkiller will have a new home in Baltimore. We have security cameras on each pier, gated access to the docks, as secure as you can be. We're there 7 days a week in the season for anything you could need, from ice deliveries to the slip to help coming back in after your day on the.
All right, so you get to draw this.
I get to.
All right, you get to draw it. And my ticket is not.
I also did not get a ticket.
And he did not, but everyone else has a chance.
All right. We have 054.
Take one too. Thank you. I was going to go see it anyway.
That's awesome. Dave Sire, webmaster, and does so much for CAPCA. So thank you. And if you're disappointed yours didn't get picked, come back in March to the next in-person meeting, because Ben's colleague is going to be here to offer the exact same door prize. So you get another chance. All right. With that, thank you so very much for your attention and for being here. And be sure to turn in the white. Go to the next slide, if you would, Hillary. Go turn in your white pages with your surveys, with your announcements. Just leave them on the table and we'll come get them. And turn in your name tags when you leave, because there is a reminder right there. And
I just want to say one thing. I want to thank Cheryl so much for putting this together. It's a lot of work and she does a great job. Thank you so much.